Hey, Duck YouTube, welcome back to a new video with Rams fan YT. Before you even start watching this video, do check out part 1 of this video because I'll be starting as soon, immediately from the other one. But if you're watching it as the second one and you've already watched the first one, then hello. This is not so happy news. Maybe it is happy news if you are one of these clubs which have managed to survived administration and bounced back to heady heights of Premier League football. But that's not the tale of most of these clubs here. And I'm going to take you down a dark path of memory lane. I mean, I know how it feels as a Derby County fan right now. Phil Jagielka has been cancelled his contract today by the EFL. I absolutely hate what they're doing with Derby County at the moment. Especially Middlesbrough's chairman messing around as well. All sorts of bad things. But that will be for part 3. We're going back to the days of ITV Digital in this part. Starting in 2002 with Bradford City. During the summer, with debts of nearly £13 million, caused as a result of the collapse of ITV Digital and the fallout from Richmond's self-proclaimed 6 weeks of madness, the club were forced into administration. The players were all released, but Carbone waived much of the money owed to him to help the club survive until new owners Julian Rhodes and Gordon Gibb came in. City amazingly actually fulfilled their fixtures during the 2002-03 season, but finished 19th. Notts County, also in 2002. In September 2003, after a few years of financial difficulties, Notts County faced the real possibility of dissolution. Crippling debts and an increasingly impatient Football League board combined to leave the future of Leeds' oldest club in doubt. However, the considerable efforts of a group of local businessmen and the club supporters helped save the club from extinction. But despite new ownership, the club were unable to avoid relegation back to the bottom division in 2004. Barnsley, 2002. The team were relegated to the second division in 2002, and they entered administration, which threatened the existence of the club as Barnsley suffered greatly due to the ITV Digital crisis. A late purchase by Barnsley's then mayor, Peter Doyle, saved the club from folding. Leicester City, 2002. Leicester moved into the new 32,314-seat Walkers Stadium at the start of the 2002-03 season, ending 111 years at Filbert Street. In October 2002, the club went into administration with debts of £13 million. Some of the reasons was the loss of TV money, namely ITV Digital, which was itself in administration, had promised money to the First Division clubs for their TV rights. The large wage bill, lower than expected fees for players transferred to other clubs, and the £37 million cost of the new stadium. Adams was banned from the transfer market for most of the season, even after the club was rescued, with a takeover by a consortium led by Gary Lineker. Port Vale, 2002. In December 2002, Bill Bell called in the administrators, with the club around £1.5 million in debt. The administrators are certainly getting their work out, aren't they, in this year? The club came out of administration though in 2003-04 under a new fan ownership consortium headed by Bill Bratt's Valiant 2001 consortium. However, Horton left in February 2004, unwilling to accept the financial cutbacks imposed by the new board, and was replaced by former player Martin Foyle. York City, 2002. In December 2001, long-serving chairman Douglas Craig put the club and its ground up for sale for £4.5 million, before announcing that the club was resigned from the Football League if a buyer was not found. Motor racing driver John Batchelor took over the club in March 2002, and by December the club had gone into administration. The Supporters Trust brought the club in March 2003 after an offer of £100,000 as payment for £160,000 owed in tax was accepted by the Inland Revenue. Batchelor left having diverted almost all of the £400,000 received from the sponsorship deal with Persimmon to his racing team, and having failed to deliver on his promise of having supporters trust members on the board. Derby County, 2003. Not the first time Derby's been in administration, as Derby County's relegation saw the club enter a serious financial crisis, which forced them to sell many key players. Gregory was later suspended from his managerial duties over alleged misconduct, and former Ipswich Town boss George Burley was brought in. The club was put into receivership, then sold in October 2003 for £3 to a group led by Jeremy Keefe. Ipswich 2003. The 2003-04 season saw the club enter and come out of administration only briefly, and they continued to challenge for promotion back to the Premier League. They finished that season 5th, but were defeated in the playoff semi-finals by West Ham United. Wimbledon 2003. In August 2001, the club announced its intent to relocate to Milton Keynes. Despite opposition from the Wimbledon fans, the Football League and the Football Association, they were given permission, one of the only clubs to actually have received this, to do so on the 28th of May 2002, after a 2-1 vote by a 3-person independent commission appointed by the FA. The approval of the decision to move the club caused supporters who were against the move to found a new club, AFC Wimbledon, to which many Wimbledon fans switched their allegiance. Gates of the new club were over 3,500, compared with 2,500 or less for a relocated club. Goalkeeping coach Stuart Murdoch was promoted to manager, and as attendances plummeted, Murdoch's team finished 10th in the league during the club's last full season at Selhurst Park. Wimbledon entered administration in June 2003 and played their first match in Milton Keynes in September. Although crowds attending the club's games at its new base were bigger than those at Wimbledon, the administrator in charge of the club's financial affairs sold any player who could command a transfer fee, and Murdoch's teams finished bottom of the league. The club were brought out of administration at the end of the 2003-04 season and subsequently renamed Milton Keynes Dons. Darlington 2003. In 2002, Darlington made unsuccessful approaches to sign international stars Paul Gascoigne and Faustino Asprilla, and moved into their new stadium, named the Reynolds Arena, in the summer of 2003. Reynolds had paid the club's debts when he took over, but the cost of the stadium, partly financed with high-interest loans and built without a realistic expectation of filling it, drove the club into administration 6 months later. Reynolds resigned as director in January 2004, with the club under threat of an imminent closure. A benefit match featuring footballers such as Gascoigne, Brian Robson and Kenny Dalglish played in front of a crowd of over £14,000, and 14,000 people raised £100,000 to help ensure survival in the short term. Despite the off-field problems, David Hodgson, in his third spell as manager, and his players produced some fine performances as the team avoided relegation. At the end of the season, Reynolds was obliged to hand over the control to the Sterling Consortium to bring the club out of administration. Stuart Davis taking over as chairman, he and his staff adopted a fan-friendly approach, in contrast to the abrasive Reynolds before in 2006. The club was sold to property developer George Houghton. Bradford City, 2004. You notice that actually at the end of the last video, I had mentioned Bradford as they spent a period in administration in 2002 before agreeing a creditors' voluntary agreement which saw them stay in the league. But the Bantams were then in 2004 in the hands of the accountant firm Kroll. The club's finances had been the cause of a feud between the Rhodes family and the former chairman Gordon Gibb, both major shareholders at Valley Parade. The Rhodes family and Gibb helped rescue the club early in 2003. Director David Rhodes told Bradford's website, "Since we are not willing to continue to gift any further funds to the club, and because the club have now defaulted on its CVA payments, the supervisors of the CVA have had no other option but to seek an administration order. The feud took a twist before the game against Crewe, when Gibb, who resigned as chairman the previous month, addressed the crowd from the side of the pitch. Wrexham, 2004. At the start of the 21st century, the club was dogged with many problems off the pitch, including then chairman Alex Hamilton, attempting to get the club evicted from the stadium so that he could use and sell it to his own development purposes. The saga involved the sale of a racehorse ground to a separate company owned by Hamilton immediately after he became the club's chairman. In the summer of 2004, Hamilton gave the club a year's notice to quit the ground. On the 3rd of December 2004, the club was placed in financial administration by the High Court in Manchester, as the club owed £2.6 million, including £800,000, which was owed to the Inland Revenue in unpaid taxes. Wrexham became the first league club to suffer a 10-point deduction under the new rule for being placed in administration, dropping them from the middle of League One table to the relegation zone after the point deduction, and subsequently condemned Wrexham to relegation. Despite their financial troubles, Wrexham went on to win the 2004-05 Football League trophy by defeating Southend United 2-0 after extra time. Cambridge United, 2005. In 2005, after 35 years in the Football League, Cambridge United were relegated into the Football Conference. This brought with it financial difficulties, and the club filed for administration on the 29th of April. On the 22nd of July 2005, the club came out of administration, with a deal being struck with HM Revenue and Customs at the 11th hour, after the intervention of then Sports Minister Richard Cabourn. Cambridge had sold their Abbey Stadium home early in the season for £1.9 million to keep the club afloat. Rotherham United, 2006. During the 2004-05 season, the club spent most of the season bottom of the league, and the club was bought by a supporters-led group named Millers 05 Limited. Rotherham were eventually relegated that season. Early in 2006, it was announced that the club faced an uncertain future unless the funding gap in the region of £140,000 per month could be plugged. The problem was compounded as Rotherham had already sold their ground to Ken Booth in return for clearing £3 million of debt and had no tangible assets. So administration was not a viable option. This led to the launch of a Save Our Millers campaign aiming to raise the £1 million needed to complete the season. It was also estimated that another £1 million was required to complete work on the new stand. South Yorkshire neighbours Sheffield United offered their support by paying the wages of Stephen Quinn and Jonathan Forte during their loan spells at Mill Moor, and also donated profits from the Bean Bank of Sheffield Derby. Many local clubs also held collections. An 11th hour intervention by a consortium of local businessmen offering substantial investment and a new business plan averted a possible dissolution of the club. Dennis Coleman took over as Rotherham United chairman and made an immediate positive impact. The final match of the 2005-06 season, home to MK Dons, was a winner-take-all relegation showdown. A scoreless draw, combined with a Hartlepool draw with Port Vale, kept Rotherham up and consigned both MK Dons and Hartlepool to a drop. However, Rotherham were to start the following season with a penalty of minus 10 points as a result of their financial troubles. Rotherham United began their second successive year in League One with a 10-point deficit as a result of the CVA, which saved the club from liquidation. At one point during the close season, the team had only 7 full-time professionals on the books, but Neil made a number of signings during this period to bolster the squad. Crawley Town, 2006. Although Crawley Town had been in administration in the late 1990s, trouble began in March 2006 when the club's players and staff were made to take a 50% pay cut and the entire squad was put up for sale. Crawley went into administration in June of that year. It was revealed by local newspaper The Argus several days later but the chairman Chas Majid was an undischarged bankrupt and therefore banned from holding a high position within the club. Majid later resigned from his post, but remained involved. The fans started a red card campaign in order to remove Chaz Majid and his owner brother Aswar Majid from the club, with fans waving red cards at the Majids and forming a supporters trust. There was a revealed that the club was around £1.1 million in debt, with nearly £400,000 due to HM revenue and customs, and the Majids claimed they were owed £700,000 by the club. By July of that year, the debts were closer to £1.4 million, including money owed to the current and former staff, and an offer of 25p in the pound was rejected by the creditors, with HMRC unwilling to move on its demand, and being the biggest creditor of the Majids, were unable to vote on the matter despite being owed money. It looked unlikely that the club would be saved. By August 2006, only one bid had come in for the club, which was from the current owners. It was rejected by 3-1. The administrators were therefore obliged to liquidate the club, and it was announced that the club would fold later that day. However, a couple of days later, in one final attempt to rescue the club, the creditors met again to decide on a final offer. The creditors were split, and so the administrators voted in Crawley Town's favour, allowing them to start the new season. The creditors would meet 14 days later to decide on an offer of 50p in the pound. The club was told that if the offer was rejected, then the club would fold there and then, and there would be no going back. By September 2006, the club's debt was £1.8 million, making former current players and staff the biggest creditors, and giving hope that a rescue bid would be accepted. The offer of 50p in the pound was later accepted, and Crawley Town was able to continue playing for the time being. Though this didn't stop HMRC trying to wind up the SA Group, this was Majid's company, over unpaid taxes. Aswar Majid was later jailed for tax fraud relating to his various other businesses. Crawley started the 2006-7 season by winning their opening 3 games, and all but wiped out their 10-point deduction. The following month, however, the club's form dipped, and this led to John Hollins and Alan Lewis losing their jobs. The news did not go down well with the fans, as the pair stuck with Crawley when others decided to leave, and they managed to lift the club off the bottom despite a 10-point deduction. They were replaced by players Ben Judge and David Woosley, with the help of John Yems, the former Millwall and Fulham coach. Life started well for the trio, who picked up 10 points from a possible 12. Crawley finished 18th in the division and managed to beat the drop after securing the point they needed on the final day of the season. In May 2007, it was confirmed that all of the Crawley Town debts had been cleared. However, complications arose, and as a result, Crawley were given a 6-point penalty for the new season, and a transfer embargo was put in place because of financial irregularities. It is believed that Crawley failed to confirm to the league that the debts had been paid. For the start of the 2007-8 season, a new regime was put in place, which included Victor Marley as the club chairman and Steve Evans as manager, with Paul Rayner as an assistant. Boston United, 2007. Because of a relegation, Boston were originally scheduled to play the 2007-8 season in the Conference National, but this position was immediately placed in doubt after the club's chairman, Jim Rodwell, entered Boston into a company voluntary arrangement late in their last game, so that 10 points would then be deducted in the 2006-7 season instead of the 2007-8 season. Although this meant that Boston started the 2007-8 season without a points penalty, FA rules dictated that they would be demoted 2 divisions as a result of HM Revenue and Customs placing a restriction into the CVA of Boston not being allowed to pay football creditors 100% of what they were owed. They therefore played the 2007-8 season in the Conference North Division, 2 steps below the Football League. This would be United's first season under the new ownership of David Newton and Neil Kempster, who took control of the club over their ex-chairman, Jim Rodwell. Despite finishing the 2007-8 campaign in 10th place under the guidance of Tommy Taylor, United were still in administration by the 2nd of January of the 2nd Saturday of May in 2008. This meant they were relegated again to the Northern Premier League Premier Division for the 2008-9 season. Despite coming out of administration just before the start of the new season anyway, Boston United failed to have this decision overturned. Leeds United, 2007. An insolvency specialist, Gerald Krasner, led a consortium of local businessmen who took over Leeds and oversaw the sale of the club's assets, including senior and emerging youth players of any value. Leeds were unsurprisingly relegated during the 2003-4 season. Following relegation to the Championship, assistant manager Kevin Blackwell was appointed manager. Most of the remaining players were sold or released on free transfers to reduce the high wage bill. Blackwell was forced to rebuild almost the entire squad through free transfers, and Leeds were forced to sell both their training ground and stadium in the autumn of 2004. The board finally sold the club to Ken Bates for £10 million. Under Blackwell, Leeds reached the Championship playoff final, which they lost to Watford, with the team performing poorly. Blackwell's contract was terminated, and Leeds hired John Carver as caretaker manager. But his spell was not a success, and he was relieved of his duties, with Dennis Wise eventually installed as his replacement. Wise was unable to lift the team out of the relegation zone for much of the season, despite bringing in a number of experienced loan players and free transfers on short-term deals. With relegation virtually assured, Leeds entered administration on the 4th of May 2007, thus incurring a league-imposed 10-point deduction that officially relegated the club to the third tier of English football. The club had previously never played any lower than the second tier. The players whom Wise had brought in were released. He was forced to build a squad almost from scratch, and because of administration, Leeds were unable to sign any players until a few days before the opening game of the season. On the 3rd of July 2007, HM Revenue and Customs lodged a legal challenge to Leeds creditors' voluntary agreement. Under league rules, if the club was still in administration at the start of the following season, Leeds would have been prevented from starting their campaign by the Football League. Following the challenge by HMRC, the club was put up for sale by KPMG, and again Ken Bates' bid was accepted. The league eventually sanctioned this under the exceptional circumstances rule, but imposed a 15-point deduction due to the club failing to exit administration with a CVA, as the Football League rules required. On the 31st of August 2007, HMRC decided not to pursue its legal challenge any further. Despite the 15-point deduction, Wise and his assistant Gus Poyet guided Leeds to a playoff position. Luton Town, 2007. After a poor start to the 2007-8 season, the club entered administration on the 22nd of November 2007. Pinkney stated he would fund the club's overheads while 10 points were deducted. Meanwhile, the FA probe on transfer irregularities dragged on, described by Pinky as a storm in a teacup. Blackwell was sacked by the administrator on the 15th of January 2008 to be replaced by former player Mick Harford. The club subsequently entered the custody of the Luton Town Football Club 2020 consortium, with broadcaster and Luton supporter Nick Owen named chairman. Luton were relegated to League Two on the 12th of April, following a 2-1 home defeat to Brighton and Hove Albion. Luton finished the season in bottom place, though even without the points deduction, they would have been relegated regardless. The investigation into illegal agents' payments was concluded in the summer, and the club was handed a 10-point deduction for the 2008-9 season on the 3rd of June 2008, along with a £50,000 fine. The club's recent history of administrations meant the Football League only offered to return to the Football League share to Luton on the condition that they play with a further 20-point deduction. Staring down the barrel of a gun, Luton were forced to start the season with a 30-point penalty, the biggest points deduction ever handed to a club in the top 4 tiers of English football. Luton beat Scunthorpe United 3-2 in the EFL Trophy final in front of 40,000 of their own supporters at Wembley Stadium, but lost their league status 8 days later. On the 13th of April 2009, Luton Town were finally relegated from the Football League after a spell of 89 years, as Chesterfield held Luton to a draw. Coupled with a victory for Mike Newell's Grimsby Town, this meant Luton's survival in the league became mathematically impossible to achieve. Bournemouth, 2008. In February 2008, Bournemouth were forced into administration, suffering a 10-point deduction, which put them in relegation trouble. Bournemouth had debts of around £4 million and almost went out of business completely. The off-field uncertainty continued throughout the season, with only one ultimately unsuccessful bid for the club accepted, and the club ended the season being relegated to League Two. Ahead of the 2008-9 season, the team's future in the Football League was put into doubt when the league threatened to block Bournemouth's participation in League Two. Due to problems with the club's continuing administration and changing ownership, the league ordered both Bournemouth and Rotherham United to demonstrate that they could fulfil all their fixtures and find a way out of administration, eventually allowing the club to compete with a 17-point penalty for failing to follow the Football League insolvency rules. The new company was ordered to pay unsecured creditors the amount offered at the time of the original CVA, around 10 pence in the pound, within 2 years. Early into the season, manager Bond was sacked and replaced by former player Jimmy Quinn, who would himself leave the club only a few months later. Former player Eddie Howe took over as manager, with the club still 10 points adrift at the bottom of the league, and initially on a caretaker basis, becoming the youngest manager in the Football League at the age of 31. At the end of 2008, it was announced that local businessman Adam Murray had completed the purchase of 50% of the club's shares from previous chairman Paul Baker. However, in January 2009, Murray missed the deadline to buy Baker's shares. In the final home game of the 2008-9 season, the Cherries guaranteed their Football League status by beating Grimsby Town 2-1 with a winning goal 10 minutes from time by Bournemouth's Steve Fletcher, sparking wild celebrations after a fairy tale ending to the Great Escape. They finished their troubled season with their best away win in 30 years, with a 4-0 victory at Morecambe. In June 2009, the consortium, including Adam Murray, finally took over Bournemouth. The consortium included Jeff Mostyn, former Vice Chairman Steve Sly, Neil Blake, and former Dorchester Town Chairman Eddie Mitchell. Rotherham United 2008. In mid-March 2008, it was revealed that Rotherham had again entered administration and would be deducted at 10 points. This was accompanied by a drop in form, and Rotherham finished ninth in the league. Towards the end of the season, it was revealed that local businessman Tony Stewart was to take over as chairman and club owner, but was advised not to exit administration via CVA, meaning an additional points deduction for the following season. On the 6th of August, 3 days before the start of the season, the Football League threatened to block Rotherham, as well as Bournemouth, from participating in League Two for the 2008-9 season. The club hadn't yet exited administration or completed the process of transferring ownership. The Football League ruled that accepting the 17-point deduction would be a condition the team must obey to be eligible to play, which was accepted. In addition, Rotherham United were forced to leave Mill Moor, their home of over 100 years, after disputes with landlords. Being further in debt, Rotherham almost sold their training ground at Houghton Roberts, and now trained at the Doncaster Rovers Keepmoat Stadium, renting out one of their pitches. This led to further complications after the Football League demanded a £750,000 bond for the team to play outside of the town's boundaries for a maximum of 4 years. The club must move back to Rotherham within that period, or face losing their Football League share. Halifax Town, my final one for today, 2008. In 2007, the club was placed into administration by a local consortium trying to buy the club. In spite of being docked 10 points for entering administration, the club again survived relegation on the last day of the season. However, the club failed to get a company voluntary arrangement to bring the club out of administration. Though the club appealed against the decision to remove it from the football conference, the appeal was unsuccessful and the club was wound up. In May 2008, it had been revealed that following a major error, the club owed over £800,000 to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, making the club more than £2 million in the red. The Supporters Trust prepared a backup plan to form a new club should it be required. Under the name, however, the club was reformed by the same directors of a previous legal entity under the name FC Halifax Town, and was accepted to play in the Northern Premier League Division 1 North in the 2008-9 season. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new around here. There's quite a lot going on at my club at the moment, so that's obviously not great. And obviously it's not great for those ones who sent in liquidation, but lots of them are Phoenix clubs which are now doing very well. Coming up, I'm going to run to the Don Amott Arena and record there. Hope you enjoyed the one about Pride Park, even though the audio was a bit dodgy. And the history of your club for Gillingham, I think it is. But goodbye for now.